What's going on, everybody? It's Bill Bailey with today's Boondoggle. And real quick housekeeping note, if you are watching us on YouTube or Rumble or the BitChute channel, please hit the follow and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or iTunes or any of the podcast platforms that we're available on, please hit that follow and subscribe button. Help us build up our numbers, show up in your stream so you can catch interviews and conversations like the one I'm about to have right now. Mr. TJ Kreutzer of the We Defy Foundation. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to get this set up. I became, we'll kind of get into how I became familiar with you and everything like that. But, usually when I have somebody on for the first time, I like to get a background on them. So originally, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I wanted to be an X-Wing pilot.
Nice.
When I was a little kid. And that trench run, that kind of stuck with me for a long time. And I got a little older into my young teens and started getting into flight simulators and things like that. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in Parma. And
Nice.
when I was about 10th.
Yeah,
not too far, right down the road. And in 10th grade, my mom, I still remember this. I was going to bed or something. She came up to say goodnight, and she sat down in the bed and she said, "What do you think about all this flying stuff and these airplanes and these models that you're making?" And I said, "I don't know. I mean, they're cool. It's fun." She goes, "Is that something you're interested in beyond just kind of a hobby?" I didn't really know what she was getting at first. Like, what do you mean? She said, "Well, do you think you want to be a pilot?" And I said, I don't know. I never thought about it. I mean, how do you even do that? That's like being an NFL player. Like, we don't know anyone who does that.
Yeah.
So she told me about the Air Force Academy and said, your grades, your dad and I think your grades are probably good enough to go to college. And if you think this flying thing is interesting and something you might like to look into, then maybe we should look into a service academy or RTSC, because there's no money for you for college. So if you're going to go, we're going to have to find a way to fund it. And a service academy or ROTC would be a great way to do that. And I'm lucky she knew what those things were, because I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. And then to be supportive too, to see that you had an interest with that. So, I just found out, like, right before he went on, that you were from the Cleveland area originally.
Yeah.
So, where'd you go to school out in Parma?
I went to Valley Forge High School. So it's actually Parma Heights, where I spent most of my childhood. I was born in I guess we lived
I'm
in
currently in
Strongsville.
Brook Park, so I'm like on the border.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was born at was it Fairview Hospital? Is that still there?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
so I was
me
born
too.
there. And then lived in Strongsville until I was 6 months, and then moved in with my grandma, who lived on Chesterfield Road, while we were waiting to move into the house on Bowerdale that we lived in. So this is, by Pearl and Ridge, kind of in that Pearl Ridge Snow, that triangle there.
Yeah.
And that is where I grew up. My both sets of grandparents lived within a mile of that. I biked all over Parma, up all the way to Valley Forge to Parma Town. I mean, that's just how we got around, and that's what at the time that's what we did. We just I don't know how many miles I put on my little BMX.
I grew up in North Olmsted and graduated from North Olmsted High School. But
when did you graduate?
91.
Do you know Bobby Kreutzer?
Yeah, I think so. The name
that's
sounds
my
familiar.
cousin, and he went there, and he is about 5 or 6 years older than me. And we're really getting into the third and fourth ring. But so fast forward through a bunch of other parts of my story. I live in Minnesota now, and a couple years before I moved here, my cousin Bobby moved here. So
nice.
Well, all of our parents live in Cleveland. They're all still Cleveland Everything fans, and here we are, me and Bobby in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I remember the name. I'd have to check the yearbook or something for the
Yeah,
face,
yeah,
but
yeah. That's
but I
where. Yeah,
remember hearing the name. But yeah, and it's funny too because Valley Forge, my daughter's actually going to Tri-C right now, and she's
okay.
in the music, and they're doing a performance at Valley Forge on Sunday. So
Oh wow,
I'll be there
that's great.
Sunday.
It's funny. I mean, you say small world, but it really
Yeah,
is.
yeah, definitely. And then, do you know when I mean, it sounds like it was kind of decided for you to pursue the pilot thing, but was there any other calling that you felt to serve your country?
And the only other component of that really was back in, I think I must have been about 8th grade, when Desert Shield was building up. Right when it kicked into Desert Storm, I was with my mom in the car, and I said, "I think I want to do that. I think I want to help protect people." Um, and that comment that no one else in my family had been in the military except my grandparents and all his, my grandpa, his brothers were all in World War II, but nobody in that middle generation went. No one was drafted into Vietnam. No one volunteered to serve. So there wasn't a big focus on that in my family, but my mom took enough mental notes over the years to, I guess, just kind of watch and see maybe there's a fit here and an opportunity for him. So she kind of helped um, make me aware of the possibility. And once I started to figure out and believe that this flying thing, this dream, was a possibility, I went all in on it. And everything I did, basically from that conversation on through the rest of high school, I did with an intention of setting myself up to get Air Force Academy appointment so that I could hopefully someday go fly fighters.
Nice. And then
And
that definitely motivated you to keep your grades up and
yeah, grades up, stay out of trouble, don't get arrested, don't drink on rage. I mean, all these things, all these parties, all the stuff my friends were starting to do, that I stayed out of because um, we were kind of a victim of the Rust Belt stuff. Like
yeah.
we had a certain standard of living growing up, and then when the Rust Belt when the steel industry fell apart, we were involved in that demographic, that suffered from that. So um, I knew to have the opportunities that I thought I wanted, I was going to have to. I may not have a big margin for error, so I didn't
Yeah.
want to screw it up. Didn't want to screw anything up.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, you were purpose driven and
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
mission focused basically already
yeah,
before you went in. And then
yeah.
so you get accepted to the Air Force Academy,
Mhm.
and then that was basically then your college after high school. And
Yeah, so when I was applying, I had a liaison officer who was excellent. Every candidate is assigned an Air Force officer that helps them through the process and evaluates them and everything. And this guy, his name was Paul Edwards, and I still keep in touch with him. He's got to be in his 70s now, and he just knew exactly how to help me represent myself in order to make the most bang because my grades were good, but they weren't outstanding. I didn't get in to the academy based on as much of my grades. They met the minimums and maybe a little bit above the minimums, but it was the extracurricular. It was his leadership stuff. It was Civil Air Patrol. I interned in a congressional office. I did all these things that made it very obvious that this is what I wanted to do. Paul Edwards told me if you want to fly fighters, you have to graduate, probably at least in the top half of your class. And then you want to go be a sailplane instructor at the academy. And then you want to go to Euro NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training. It's NJEPT is what we call it for short. And it's NATO's pilot training course, and it's in Texas. So NATO sends a bunch of NATO countries send their pilot training students there. And a chunk of the US ones also go there. They go to other bases around the country as well. But this one particular one at the time, if you wanted a fighter and you graduated, you got a fighter. Everywhere else, you didn't know. You could be flying tankers or bombers or whatever. So I wanted that was a very selective process, and I wanted to stack the deck as much as I could. So when I graduated from 4 years at we call it the zoo, I got that slot to NJEPT, and I graduated there in 2001. with an F-16. And then from there on, I got that, I got to be the fighter pilot that I had wanted to be.
And then during the whole process of the academy, is that like kind of like your boot camp as well and military training?
Sort of. The first 6 weeks that you're there is boot camp. It's done in the summer. So I left the day after my 18th birthday, and I still have a picture at Cleveland Hopkins Airport at one of the gates where, everybody could come to the gate. This is pre-September 11th. We had like 30 people come, like family and friends. And I turned around right before I went down there, and I waved. And there's a picture of me waving, walking down. And that was June 29th. And then I ended up going to basic that day. And it's 6 weeks. And then after that, you finish that program, and then you get ready for the school year. So there's like a little bit of a transition. But the upperclassmen lead you through basic. There's some enlisted folks there that kind of act as like MTLs, like military training leaders, or drill sergeants, stuff like that. But for the most part, it's a leadership course for the upperclassmen too. So they're running your boot camp and everything like that. And then from there, you go into the school year, and then it's 4 years of academics, and then the summers you have military training. Like, you can be running boot camp for the freshmen. It can be flying airplanes, jumping out of airplanes, all kinds of different kinds of survival training, SERE, all that kind of stuff is done in the summers. But the school year is an academic year, but it's with a military model. So you get up, everybody, gets up at the same time-ish, the doors open, or they can't open around the same time, the reveille starts. You get ready to go, you march to breakfast, you have breakfast as a squadron, you go over to classes, and then you're kind of free for the day to go through your classes. And then at the end of the day, you go, back to the dorm, drop off all your stuff, have your lunch in the middle of the day too, as a squadron. And then after school, you have, if you're an intercollegiate athlete, you go play sports 5 days a week. If you are not an intercollegiate athlete, you still got to play a sport. So they have intramurals that you do twice a week. And then the other 2 nights a week, you have on plus Friday, you have off, and then weekends are yours too. You couldn't really leave the base. The older you got, the more senior you got, the more ability you had to leave. Eventually, you could have a car, but you got privileges as the years went on. So like your freshman year, you weren't allowed to have CDs or anything like that. You weren't allowed to have video games.
Wow.
And then your sophomore year, you get stuff back. Your junior year, you get stuff back. Your senior year, you could have a TV, stuff like that.
Yeah, no distractions. You got to stay focused during.
Yeah,
show that you're there for the training.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So then you graduate, and then obviously, I mean, not everybody goes to be pilots though through the Air Force Academy. They become officers in other parts of the Air Force.
Yeah. So at the time when I was applying, about a third of the class was getting pilot slots. So you had to be in the top third. By the time I graduated, they had more pilot slots than they had medically qualified candidates. So it just kind of, you never know. It's all over the place. It just depends on the needs of the Air Force. So I was lucky.
Yeah.
I did graduate in the top third, and I got NJEP'd. But I just know, based on my academic record, I graduated middle of the road academically. My military grades, evaluations got me moved up in the class. And I knew I was going to have something like that to be competitive for that NJEP slot. So it all did work out, but man, it was just like, everything I did for like a 10-year period was even after graduating, getting into pilot training, until I actually got my wings, everything I did was with that intent.
Yeah. And then, so you said you went to the school where all the NATO pilots go in Texas. Is that like the Air Force version of Top Gun?
No, so Top Gun is what you would call that in the Air Force, is Air Force Weapons School. And that is where they take the best people from each fighter squadron, like 1 or 2 every year or 2, and they send them there to become the best instructors in the Air Force. And so the Top Gun program in the Navy is kind of similarly built, where they take really excellent pilots and put them through this training course, and then they send them back out to their squadron to be the subject matter expert on tactics and weapons and enemy stuff and all that kind of stuff. So that's not basic pilot training. The Navy has their own basic pilot training courses as well. And I think it's in Pensacola, maybe, I forget exactly, or Corpus.
Yeah.
I forget. It's been a while, but undergraduate pilot training is literally, you are a brand new young officer, and your job is going to be, instead of going to be a finance officer in the Air Force or, you know, Intel or whatever, you're going to go fly fighters. So that's your training. And you're in this training pipeline for a long time. You graduate college, you get your commissioning, then you go to pilot training. You're in that for another year. So you're not doing the mission even after you get your wings. Because then after I got my wings, I went to fly the F-16, but I had to train in that. So it's like over like a 2-year course or total time from when you start flying, or like day one of ground school, until you actually get your wings and then get your actual airplane that you're going to have as your tactical weapon. But even then, you're not qualified to use it like as a weapon yet. You have to go to your actual squadron, and then they do your final certifications to make you a combat pilot. So it is a long process. It's a super long pipeline.
Gotcha. Well, it's an important job, so it should require a lot of training.
Yeah.
But so then you are going through that. You earn your way through, and then you earn your wings. Like, what was that? What was that moment like for you? And
pilot training was the hardest year of my life. It was the first time I think I wasn't immediately one of the best in the room at everything all the time. Even at the academy, when my grades were so, and I was never going to I never in my life got straight A's. And I wasn't always the most talented student. Most things I got myself involved in, I was really good at really fast, and was always in the top couple. Pilot training came around, and I started off really hot and did great in the first airplane, the first 6 months. And then second 6 months, we switched airplanes to the T-38, and it was a completely different kind of airplane. The wings are different. It flew different. Everything about it was totally different. And I struggled through a little bit of it, and I saw the other people, my peers, starting to climb, and my confidence just went, and I had to work through that. And that was probably the most challenging chunk of time in my life up to that point, because I'd never failed before anything, really.
yeah,
I mean, and I was scared that I wasn't going to make it, because it is extremely competitive, and this is an elite group of people. Eventually I started to figure it out, and then I climbed the rungs back up into, getting a good assignment out of there. But there was a chunk of time that I wasn't sure I was even going to make it through. And that was the most challenging year of my life up to that point. And getting the wings was so exciting, and it meant so much, because I knew what I had put into that. I had put all those years going into it, of all the, I would say, like, the dedication and self-discipline to work hard and stay focused for all that time. But that payoff at the end, because then all of a sudden it was hard. Everything up to that was easy. It took discipline, but discipline for me was easy. I just did all the things that made sense that I was supposed to do. This was the first time that I didn't know if I was gonna make it through. I think a lot of people deal with that at the Air Force Academy, because you're amongst some of the best students in the country, and sometimes guys really struggle there. Or sometimes people, that's the first time they weren't the best in the room, and
but
it took me to pilot training.
Do you feel that was a process that you needed to go through, and now looking back, you're grateful for?
I mean, I would say it's deeper. It's different. It's not quite that. the Air Force never taught me how to deal with failure ever. The military's really not good at that.
No.
They make it scary, and they make you believe that the stakes are so high that you can't fail. And that's not that it's not true. The stakes are high sometimes, but it's very easy for some people, maybe my personality or other people with personalities like mine, to take that to a maladaptive place, or to a place where you're taking it too far, and this is where I think jiu-jitsu has been. I always say this: I would have been a better fighter pilot if I had done jiu-jitsu first, if I had gotten into that sport, because jiu-jitsu is what taught me to deal with failure and use it as a tool.
Yeah.
Military never teaches you that.
No, they don't. And
They don't.
And then they leave you like kind of thinking like, I mean, because there's lives. Oh, you
I
froze up
lost
for
you
a
for a
second.
second.
You
Yeah,
there?
I lost you. Yeah, I'm
All
here.
right. And then, yeah, so then you carry that and you get stuck in that like fight or flight thing, which we'll get into
Yeah.
a little bit more. But so one thing I wanted to ask too, real quick, you graduate, you get your wings. How was that to experience with, your mom and your family that, supported you through that?
Well, there's they were obviously, really proud. But there's also pressure too, and that's something I learned later on in life. Like, I put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed, partly because of what I saw happen around me in Cleveland,
Yeah.
where the economy in that part of the country just completely got torched and fell apart. And I knew so many people whose parents lost their jobs, and um, that may have been another part of this whole fear of failure thing, because I did not want to end up in a position where something like that could happen to me. I was going to do everything I could to um, give myself as many options and be as marketable and everything else as possible. And I mean, they were obviously, my family was always supportive, extremely proud. But I also felt a lot of internal pressure to not mess it up. And I think
Yeah.
that's another reason why pilot training was so hard, because I thought, well, if I don't make it through this, then what? I didn't have an answer, you know. So I absolutely appreciate that they were supportive of me and everything else like that. But like, we all have our own little demons and all the little ways we think about problems that aren't helpful. And
Yeah.
I think watching what happened around my community growing up made me feel like I really had to knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
And that was a stressor that I carried with me for a long, long time.
Yeah. I sometimes I feel like I still carry that, but, um, I want to ask you some of the questions I asked, veterans about their time in though. What were, some of the oddest things that you witnessed or experienced?
They always happen on deployments, because there's so much time. You're sitting in Iraq, and there's just not always that much going on. So guys, just you sometimes when you dump the fuel out of or you turn an airplane off, and there's fuel coming out of certain places, and the crew chiefs would capture it, with a plastic bag or whatever. And sometimes they get bored, and they'd catch it in their plastic bag, and they'd run around behind the airplane, and they'd throw it behind one where the engine was on, and watch, like, guys, what are you doing? Don't do that, And then guys would get in trouble for doing stuff like that, you know what I mean? But they would do it anyway, and silly, goofy things like that. I mean, that was usually the kind of stuff that it was always on deployments, where people were coming up with
Yeah.
ways to deal with their boredom.
Yeah. Yeah. Dangerous, destructive ways we deal with our boredom.
Yeah, I mean, luckily with that sort of thing, they weren't doing anything that was, going to damage an airplane, because it's behind it, But still,
Yeah. But it's like
probably not a good idea.
being at a KISS concert or something,
Yeah,
and the
well, you
pyro
can
goes
try
off.
anything once, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I
And if
wouldn't
you
still wouldn't
survive,
advise.
then,
Yeah,
learn.
yeah. If you survive.
Yeah. And then, what would you say is like one of the worst places that you served at, without breaking OPSEC?
Worst. You know, I think Korea was awesome because where I was, we didn't have any families there. So as a young lieutenant fighter pilot, all you had to do was study. But it was hard being away from the US for a year or two. And it was interesting to get to explore the country and see something completely different. But you did get homesick. I mean, it was a long year. And I think the infrastructure there on the bases and stuff. I mean, it's sort of almost like a deployment, you know. It's not a deployment, but the dorms we lived in weren't great, and the heater would break a lot. So sometimes I'd just turn the oven on and leave the oven door open to get heat in the winter. And then sometimes the water from the hot water heater would be brown because they didn't change out the hot water heater. So you let the water run. And then there were a lot of mosquitoes. So I used to sleep with a fan on because they wouldn't land on you and bite you in the middle of the night. So as much as the desert was like, everybody's really familiar with, or most of us who deployed to the desert are familiar with what that was like, especially if you were in the summer. My deployment to Iraq was 5 months, or was 4.5 months. It wasn't as long as a lot of the, Army and the Marines have, those deployments got longer and longer and longer. But that year in Korea was tough. So I would probably say that it was awesome, but it was also hard. Because of the day-to-day. You didn't have the day-to-day niceties that you would have at a normal base. I think when you're deployed, you kind of expect it's going to suck.
Yeah.
But Korea was kind of a weird, especially where we were at. The base could have been better.
I remember during my last deployment in Kuwait, it's like, and I was with the Navy, but we were there on, working with the Army at AirFJON, but we'd always, and it was a 10-month deployment. But I remember we would always, like, whenever we got liberty and were able to get permission, we would take the shuttles to the Air Force Base, because you guys had the best pool and all that was like going to the resort for us.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, one time I was flying stateside, went to San Diego just to do some cross-country training with the airplanes, and landed in North Island. It was hot that day, and we went up into the FBO, the base ops for the airplane stuff, and there's an enlisted person behind the desk, and it's hot, and they have a couple fans on, and the windows are all open, and we're doing some flight planning. It's just brutal. I'm like, I walk up like, hey, do you guys have like a back room or like one room that's like air conditioned where we can kind of do this stuff? And she just looked at me like, sir, this is the Navy, not the Air Force. Noted, and my bad. Very well then. So
that's awesome. And then what would you say is one of the best places you got to serve at?
I think probably Salt Lake City. And I was at Hill Air Force Base, and it was a beautiful place to live. The airspace was absolutely incredible. A lot of I think I didn't really look at where they filmed Top Gun, but I would guess they did some of that maybe in the ranges out there in Utah. And that's where the Bonneville salt flats are. So you see like car commercials run across like salt flats or whatever. That's an area out by Wendover, Nevada, which is right on the border of Nevada and Utah. And that whole area, this huge area, is airspace that we can go and train in the airplanes, and we can drop live bombs in certain parts of it. There's supersonic runs you can do all kinds of stuff. It's just fantastic. Nice. Really, really cool. So like, even though Korea was a good place to learn to be a fighter pilot, the airspace there wasn't as good. And it's not good in a lot of places. You do the best you can with it based on, the geography and maybe even the cultural stuff below you. Like, is it a metro area or what? Well, this desert out west of Salt Lake is just fantastic. It's super awesome airspace. So that was the most fun flying, I think, that I got to do. Nice. With the F-16.
And then what pet peeve do you have with civilians since transitioning out of the military?
Hey, my cousin Charlie was in the Air Force. His name is Charlie Friedman. Do you know him? No, don't know him. I think that's one question that just no, I have no idea. But my transition was gradual too, because I joined the reserves after active duty. So,
Yeah.
at the time I left active duty, I was flying T-38s as an instructor pilot, and I left the active duty, and the next day I put on a different set of patches and then did the same job. But instead of doing it every day, I did it about 6 days a month. And at the same time, I got hired by an airline. So um, I started to get the transition into, and a lot of airline pilots have a military background too. So there was not really a clean break for me, from like day zero civilian. It was, you know what I mean? I always had kind of a foot in two worlds for a long time. And that helped with the transition a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like that would. And then what is something that you'll always carry with you from your time of service?
Um, this goes back to my Air Force Academy days, and you get an excellent education there. But I think one of the things that they really taught you how to do, process wise, was how to solve ill-defined problems. And that was incredibly important in terms of military leadership and military decision making too. Excuse me. Where you never have perfect information, you never have enough resources, but you know when go time is. So
Yeah.
you have to try to solve the problems with a limited set of resources, and then make the best guess you can with what to do, and then execute. You're never going to have a perfect plan. You're never going to have all of it all figured out. And after a little while, it's going to fall apart.
Yep. Usually does.
So then you have to be able to adapt and think on the fly. So that solving ill-defined problems, I think, I've used that my entire adult life, and it was a
Yeah.
skill they taught us at the academy.
And then what's one of the funniest stories you feel you can share about your time in service?
How bad can the language get on this?
Oh, it's a
Is it
censorship free.
okay? It's not that bad. I just want to make sure if I throw an F-bomb in there, it's okay.
Yeah.
So this is pretty good. Or it's kind of funny. There was when pilots get their call signs, it's because they, the squadron names them, and a lot of times it's when you dork something up. So one guy, this is back in Korea, was taxiing down the taxiway after his flight. He was a brand new guy, new on the base. We're a small base. We knew everybody. And as he was taxiing, he went to turn off a switch in the F-16. But instead of hitting the correct switch, he hit the battery. Let's turn the battery off. And what this does is it turns on this auxiliary engine that is meant to power the airplane if there's an emergency and the engine shuts down. When this happens, it sends a squirt of smoke out, and it's a fluid. It's a chemical that's pretty nasty, and you don't really want to be around it. But if you're looking at the airplane from the tower, it looks like it might be an engine fire or something. So the guy in the tower, the SOF, who's a pilot in charge of flying, sees this guy taxiing, trailing smoke. And he tells the guy, he gets on the radio, he says, "Hey, stop the airplane, turn on the parking brake, and get out of the airplane." Well, we have a procedure where anytime you egress the airplane, you got one of the steps is turn off the engine, right? Because you don't want to leave the engine running. You want to kill everything and then run away from the airplane. Well, this lieutenant did exactly what he was told. He stopped the airplane, he set the parking brake, and he opened the canopy and got out with everything still running. So now he has F-16 on the taxiway, loud, making all this noise. The hydrogen's spilling out. And then the emergency response vehicles all come up there because they think it's an engine fire, and they get out there. They realize what's happening. So then they have to get the guys come out with their hazmat suits on because of the chemicals that are coming out of the airplane. They have to sit there and wait for a certain chunk of time before they can go in and actually, kill the engine and put the airplane away. So his call sign was FUGE. It was FUGE for fucked up ground aggress. And that was how if you got a good call sign, or if you did something pretty funny or pretty good, you'd get a good reminder of it for most of your career after that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably wouldn't have been his first choice to have on his patches or whatever the
No.
rest of his career. So then speaking of which, I guess Blitz was your call sign? I
Yeah,
take
it's
it?
kind it's a little bit of a play on my last name because it's a very German name. Like Blitzkrieg, Kreutzer, and it stands for boys laugh is too zealous, because sometimes we'd be in the bar and if I have a couple drinks, my laugh would get pretty out of control and pretty annoying. So that's where I got mine.
Nice. And then what is your greatest hope for the country that you've been willing to give your life for?
um, I really want to see this partisan divide, get shorn up a lot. And I think, we talk about this culture war and all these problems that we're having, and I think so much of it's just based on technology and
Yeah.
what the way technology funnels us into our own little camps. Because it's really, and this is something from jujitsu too. You know how easy it is to read something on Facebook and get pissed off at somebody and just make all these assumptions about who they are and what they're like, and that you don't like their attitude, you don't like them. If you're in the gym with them and you interact with them the way we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis, face to face, you stop caring.
Yeah.
You don't care about people's politics. You don't care about who they voted for. You care about them as an individual and as a person, because they're in your circle and you're their friend. And um, we get that in these communities in jujitsu, and where we're together every day. We're working hard on the mats together. We're trying to learn a skill. We're trusting each other not to physically hurt each other.
Yeah.
And Facebook and Instagram, all that's lost. And I think that way of communicating, it's not so much that America's changed. I mean, it has some, but I think it's how technology has changed how we act and how we interact that has hurt us. And I hope we're never all going to get along all the time and agree all the time, but I hope we find a way to build relationships with each other that allow us to see past some of those differences and figure out, we all bleed the same, but we
Yeah.
forget that online, you know?
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that too about you know, the differences we get to learn about each other in the gym, because like, I've been just as guilty, of, posting to go running on feelings and posting things out of emotion that, or I'll see somebody else's thing and be like, man, I can't believe they're saying this. Nine
Yeah,
times out of 10, I'll scroll past what I don't agree with,
sure.
without chiming in.
Yeah,
I'll post something and it seems like then, everybody pile on me, and I'm assumed to be a
yeah.
certain way or whatever. And the funny thing is with at my gym is the guys I question a lot of things, because I mean, I did, like we both were in the government for a very long time. So, you kind of learn, I don't know, my trust is kind of lower. So I question a lot more
Mhm.
things, which, gets me labeled, being a conspiracy theorist, I guess, a lot of times. So the guys at the mats say, oh, you believe the world's flat too, don't you? And stuff like that. And it becomes, joking around like that. So, and then just to prove them wrong, I actually had a flat earth guest on here try and talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
the flat earth at one point. I'm like, all right, well, let's go for it. Let's hear what he has to say, you know? But yeah, but I've had this talk with my friend and my coach, like he's like, you know what? You got to get off social media, because when you're
Yeah.
here, everybody likes you, because they get to know you. They get to know
Yep.
you as a person, and
Yeah.
we realize you're a good person and a friend. And I'm like, yeah, man, I got you.
That's
So
that's the thing. I think that it's we to other people, we usually appear pretty one-dimensional when they're looking at what we do online, when they're looking at what we post, what we talk about, depending on the kind of stuff we like to post and talk about. But nobody's that one-dimensional.
No.
but you don't get to, until you're in the room with the person, you don't always get to know. So we make all these assumptions about people based on what they're throwing on Facebook or Instagram. And we fail to see how we're similar, and we fail to know how we would get along if we had other context in which we knew the person. And I think that's one of the awesome things about jujitsu, is because I mean, jujitsu brings everybody in. You know, I mean, and when you're in the gym, people just, they don't care. You know, they don't care what your politics are. They care. You're building relationships, not making adversaries. You know, for the most part.
Yeah.
That's been my experience in the gyms I've been in. And
No, I agree.
You know,
and you know, I want to roll into more of the jiu-jitsu conversation and what you are currently involved with now. But one last question from the military side, which I think will help lead to why you're involved with, you know, We Defy. But what do you feel we can do to break the stigma of mental health and PTSD?
Well, I think that what we realize, and I think what I've seen some veterans realize, especially when you leave the service, if you had a traumatic experience while deployed, or not even necessarily deployed, but that's the common one because of the war that the never-ending war we were in so recently. A lot of times individuals label themselves, or they decide, I'm a veteran. I cannot get along with civilians. I can't trust them. I can only trust people A, B, C, and D. And if you look at the experience they've had, you understand why they feel that way. You understand what's causing them to make those determinations. I think what we have to do sometimes is learn how to maybe let go of our own labels a little bit. Labels we put on other people, and the labels we put on ourselves. And I think one thing we learn in jiu-jitsu, or in the community of jiu-jitsu, if you're there long enough, is no matter what you're dealing with, eventually you're going to figure out that everybody has a story and everyone is dealing with something. It might not be trauma from military experience, but nobody gets through 20, 30, 40 years of life without experiencing trauma of some kind.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't get cured of PTSD. I don't think, I mean, there's clinicians out there probably say, sure you can. I'm not a psychologist, but most of the time it's learning to cope with it.
Yeah.
And once you've come to terms with the ability to cope with it, a lot of times the symptomology even gets better and better. It gets easier and easier. But it's that learning to cope part that I think that's the part of the stigma that we need to get rid of, that you can't cope, that everyone is screwed up, or everybody in the military is, or a lot of people in the military have PTSD because blah, blah, blah. Well, we're all messed up. Everybody's screwed up.
Yeah.
Everybody's got trauma in their life.
Yeah.
That's normal. That's called life. The severity of the trauma, can change. But the fact that we can relate to each other because we recognize that I'm not the only one. And when you have severe PTSD, anxiety, depression, things like that, we become very self-focused because of the discomfort of what we're feeling and coping with.
Yeah.
It becomes harder for us to recognize that other people are experiencing the same thing and that we're not actually alone.
Yeah. Like after my last deployment, and then, which kind of, luckily I was able to get my 20 and retire, but, there was a lot of having to feel, I used to numb out, with alcohol and whatever drugs I could sneak while I was active, to numb out, or, do other things to numb out, other unhealthy activities. And then when after my last deployment, I came home and, was going to lose my family, my daughters, and decided that, I needed to change. So I got sober,
Mhm.
and I've got 13 years now of
That's awesome.
sobriety, which I'm proud of. But,
Mhm.
the problem with that is I don't have, I don't have my crutches to numb out. I have to start
Mhm.
feeling all this stuff,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
And then I had to find other ways, like you said, of coping with these feelings, with being in my own head.
Yeah.
And anxiety used to be so, so bad. And it still gets bad at certain situations where it'll come up, but now I know I have tools. One of the tools that I've utilized that helped me with my social anxiety and self-worth has been doing this podcast. This is
Sure.
therapy for me right now, just having a conversation with somebody I just met,
Yeah.
which is like, being out in public with a stranger. Oh, hello. My sponsor would tell me, reach in pocket, pull out card, hi, and extend hand. Um,
Yeah.
just like the simple things that seem to be were overwhelming and too much. But
Sure.
as time's gone on and the different things I've been able to do that have helped me live more normal and feel and experience and cope with, ups and downs, I was able to, find out about your organization.
Mhm.
And like I said, I don't know if it was before we went on there, I was talking about, I experienced a little bit of jujitsu, but I was just an Army
Mhm.
choke dummy.
Yeah.
And that didn't leave me, and it didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. But I had a lot of friends in the jujitsu community that the plus on social media is I get to watch their journey,
Sure. Yeah.
like a little
Yep.
like voyeur or whatever, but I
Yeah.
see how well they're doing and how well it's affecting them. And I'm like, man, I want to do that. But then I come up with all my excuses with my aches and pains and weight and health and,
Yeah.
or the fears or just the mental fear. And I would listen to Jocko and he'd be like pumping jujitsu and I'd be like, and then finally I just through doing some deep therapy and even hypnotherapy and stuff, I said, I got to set some goals for myself and I got to make out and do it. And, I reached out and, learned about your guys'
Mhm.
organization. I also reached out. Thankfully, I got, I'm friends with the guy that runs the gym that I train at, you know, so I was able to reach out and say, hey, I need help and I need accountability. And it's been an awesome journey. Am I as diehard as, I'm not I'm like many of the guys that say, man, I wish I would have got into this when I was 19, or like
Yeah.
you said,
For
before you
sure.
went away from, Air Force Academy and stuff when I had a younger body. But
Yeah.
I've realized instead of comparing myself to all the guys that are, in good shape or, the younger guys and stuff like that, am I doing am I doing better than I did yesterday?
Yeah.
Am I still showing up and doing the best I can? You know, and it's been great because it's been such a good environment, especially the school I'm involved in. They make it like a family,
Yeah.
and it's almost
Mhm.
like being in a new, unit or squadron
Yeah.
almost, because there's the ball busting and the, but it's all out of love and everybody just helping lift you up. And so far that's what I've learned. But I want to talk about how you got, you know, where your jujitsu journey began.
So when I left the Air Force and the active duty and got in the reserves, we moved to Minnesota because that's where I was based out of for my civilian job. And there was a Lifetime Fitness that had a MMA program, so I thought that looks fun. So I started just doing sparring or not sparring, just pad work and um, just MMA conditioning and a little bit of ground stuff, but mostly hitting pads. And eventually, I thought, man, this looks awesome. I would really like to spar and maybe get more serious about this and try competing. I talked to my doctor. He's like, since you're a pilot, and this guy's was on the state fight commission and everything. He's like, if you were an accountant, I'd say I go for it, or an engineer. But like as a pilot in the FA and the certifications, the concussion risk is probably too high for that sport. I just don't think I can recommend it for Muay Thai and boxing. So coaches said, why don't you try jujitsu? Then I'm like, I don't, that looks stupid. Like, I don't, that's not what I said. I remember watching it and thinking it looked horrible. Like I was 170 something pounds, 165 pounds. And like, I don't want those 200-pound dudes on top of me, sweating on me, smashing me. Like, I want to hit stuff. Hitting stuff looks fun, or is fun. But they said, just give it a shot. And then I did, and I got hooked. And in July of 2015, I said, okay, I'm only going to train jiu-jitsu now. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually, instead of just tinkering with it or looking at it from afar, I'm going to actually do this. So I'd started training jiu-jitsu, and then 3 years later, it was at a seminar, and it was a fundraiser seminar for We Defy Foundation. And I found out what it was at that time. And We Defy Foundation is a nonprofit that sponsors disabled vets to train jiu-jitsu as a kind of a therapy for their service-connected disabilities. And it had only been around since 2015. So it was about 3 years in when I found out about it. And I had been looking for another opportunity because I was having some, probably like depressive or type episodes where there was, I said I had a, kind of a gradual shift out of the military, but there was still this, this frustration of, what am I doing? Like, I'm not contributing anymore. I'm not doing anything that really matters that much. And I started to feel like I wanted to volunteer for somewhere. And when I found out about We Defy, like, that's it. That's what I want to be involved in. So I went down to the headquarters gym, and they were just starting to stand up a volunteer network at the time. So I was one of the first 17 volunteers with the organization. And over the years, I just started taking on more and more responsibility and helping it to grow and build a volunteer organizational structure, enhance the programming that we offer to the athletes, and eventually got to the position I'm in now, which is vice president of the organization as a volunteer.
Wow. And then, so you were doing jiu-jitsu before you got involved with We Defy, and like, how was it that you, I mean, you said you were at some event with We Defy, but then how has that journey been with working with other veterans and seeing, how they've, how it's helped, I guess.
A few months before that seminar, I was in Chicago, and I was training at a gym, and I met a vet there, and we were talking about Iraq and how he'd just come back, and his wife was leaving, and he was having a hard time with the job, and he had no money and wasn't really able to train that much anymore. But it really helped him. He loved being in the gym. He thought it was a great thing. And then we talked for like an hour and a half afterwards, because I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, and that's what I studied at the Air Force Academy. And over the years, I have, at least on a layman level, stayed very knowledgeable on different types of therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness training and therapy, and trauma and trauma recovery. And we talked for like an hour and a half. And after that, he's like, you framed some things for me in ways to think about that no one has ever told me before, even some of the therapists that I've had at the VA. You should think about helping people, because I think you have something to offer. And that conversation, like, that kind of helped put that bug in my ear. Like, I need to do something. I need to get involved somewhere with something. I don't know what it is, but I need something else. I need more than what I'm doing right now. And then that's what led into We Defy. So what's been, for me, very fulfilling about We Defy is it's kind of two major parts to it. One, the way my brain is built, I take inputs and chaos and create order. And that's just, my brain just does that. So as this organization was growing, it's been incredibly fun to find new opportunities. And as we get more volunteer staff, ways to improve what we're doing or augment what we're doing, and continuing to just grow it, like grow upon layer. The satisfying part is the end result, because we've got over 600 veterans now that we've sponsored with jiu-jitsu. And I frequently get letters from people saying how much it changed their life, and how they feel like they have camaraderie again, and how they feel like they have sense of purpose again, or they Maybe they quit drinking, or they're making better sleep hygiene choices because they want to do better on the mats, and how they're learning to trust civilians because of, learning to tap out. And that if this person's attacking you, and they could be smaller than you, but they're beating you up, as soon as you tap, the attack stops. And this is a soccer mom, and she's kicking your ass. And you're becoming friends with these people that you don't think you have anything in common with, until you start to spend time with them on the mats, and you start to, like I said before, you realize that everyone has a story, and that you have things in common with a lot more people than you think you do. And that creates bonds. That's important. And that is very satisfying to see people that are struggling, maybe with isolation and sense of purpose, and trying to find success in something after the military. Because once you start stringing a couple successes together, it carries over into other stuff. And I think jiu-jitsu is a great way for people to get on that success track, because you start seeing progress over time, little by little. And all the other things that it does to support a healthy lifestyle can be a springboard to a whole other set of successes in life, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm thinking about my personal journey in it so far, and like everything you're saying about, just learning other people's stories and stuff like that. I'm still I've gotten a lot better, but I'm still like the king of self-sabotaging, when I start getting close, or when I start having those successes and I start getting the compliments that I'm not used to getting,
Yeah.
because or that I don't, the voice in my head tells me I'm not worthy of, or whatever. And then I'll just set myself back because I'm uncomfortable. Like, I mean, my trainer's been working me for a while, and I had a heart attack at the beginning of 2020. And I'm probably only alive because he helped me lose, like, 40 pounds before that heart attack. I ended up getting COVID at the end of 2020. It hospitalized me because I've got compromised lungs from my time over in Kuwait and everything. But which, that's a whole nother thing. You kind of need to breathe when you're out there live rolling, and somebody's putting pressure on you. But um I'm still, I get the compliments because the things that I don't see, the more experienced people are seeing, because they're like, man, your body movement's different, and you're doing this more, and and the little things, and it helps me feel, like, okay, maybe I can do this. I might gas out a little earlier than, everybody else, but if I'm getting this right, why can't I get this right? And why,
Yeah.
and
That's the key
my
part.
journey might be slower than a lot of the other guys, but what's great is they're all so encouraging. But like I said, I've self-sabotaged, where it's like I was losing weight, and then I would go eat a bunch of crap and put it back on because I was uncomfortable, didn't know how to handle it. Or people are getting close and complimenting me, and then I do something stupid to push them away, but the people at, my school, and it sounds like the jiu-jitsu community are, they keep pulling me back. It's
Yeah,
like
I mean, I think
you know.
what would you do without them? Like, what would you do without that activity in that community? And no one's perfect, right? No one's gonna bat 1,000. Like, that's ridiculous. But yet we expect that of ourselves sometimes.
Yeah,
That we
like,
cannot have setbacks, that we must not fail. And
yeah, and I put that on myself, and I
yep,
compare myself to these young guys
I do the same thing.
that are
Yeah,
like,
it's
they're
hard.
built for this. you know
Yeah,
I'm going
and
against athletes, and I'm like, oh, this guy's coming in, he's creaming me. And then I would use it because I was the old man in the room. But then there's other guys coming in that are old like me, and they're
yeah,
excelling. I'm like, I can't use the old man excuse anymore. And then, and then I find your guys' organization, and I'm seeing, I forget what the dude's name is, but he doesn't have, uh, he's missing limbs, and he's out there.
There's Joey Bozic. He's the founder. He's got one arm. There's Ben Mazga, who's he was an athlete. He's one of our ambassadors now. He's missing a foot and part of his leg. I mean, yeah, these guys are doing incredible things with, um, a set of things that make them different. But the mats, they bring us all together. And I think for Joey, the triple amputee, one of the things he said is that what he respected and found, because this is different for everybody, but everyone treated him like an equal. Nobody looked at him like, do you need, he tells a story about how somebody was trying to help him get in the car with his wheelchair. And he's like, no, I got it. Like, I know how to do this. And the guy just would not, because the guy was trying to help, but Joey didn't want that kind of help. He's like, I am self-sufficient. I can handle it. Thank you. I appreciate your kindness. However, I'm fine. You get in the jiu-jitsu gym and everybody's just beating the crap out of them, just like they're doing to everybody else. And nobody gets quartered because they're whatever, but you're still taking care of each other too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The goal there is for everybody in your program, in your gym, to get better at this thing.
And Joey's still showing up regardless.
Yeah.
Whether he's getting beat on or not, he's getting treated equally, and he's still showing up. And then that's what I'm like, I got to show up. I have no excuse, you know?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, we inspire each other. Your teammates inspire you to do things. The tagline for the foundation is prove them wrong. And we think about that externally a lot. Like, you know, that you might have a counselor at the VA that says, you know, you have anxiety. This is what you can or can't do. You know, maybe a doctor says, you know, this is, you know, you've had a heart attack. You know, I've had heart issues too. You know, you could have someone tell you that some sort of limitation, maybe family inadvertently out of love tries to protect you from stuff. So they say you should only do A, B, and C, but don't try D, because you might get hurt or you might fail, or you might not be ready for that. So this idea of prove them wrong it's partly about proving all those external voices that are coming in wrong. But really, it's about telling the voice in you to shut up.
Yeah.
It's really about proving that voice wrong, because that's the one, when we internalize those external things, that's the one that we start listening to that gets us into problems. So prove that voice wrong. And jiu-jitsu is a great tool because it can help you find you can go past what you thought were limits. And when you start doing it, you start thinking, if I can do this, maybe I can do that and that and that too.
Yeah.
And that's the goal. Like, that's the ultimate hope, is that these people find a great community. They find new things about themselves they didn't know they were capable of, and then they translate that into gains in other parts of their lives. That's what we're going for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. You talk about the people that, may have the best intentions telling you like, hey, we don't want to see, like, my cardiologist was just like, because I'm going to be 50 this coming year, you know, he's like, you know, guys our age should be, you know, swimming for cardio and stuff. Why do you want to keep doing this jiu-jitsu stuff? And I'm like, I just do. I just love being around in the environment. Now, I'm not like signing up for competitions and stuff like that. I'm just trying to get better with my guys there. Now, as time goes on, who knows? You know, I haven't closed the door on that, because I've seen a lot of other people like that inspire the hell out of me. Even Jiu-Jitsu Grandma on Instagram.
Yeah, I just saw one of her posts come up again, which was that the one she said I started when I was 69.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah, there's one I just came up the other day. I think that's been around for a little while, but it just popped up on my feed the other day, and I was laughing. Oh yeah, I've seen that a couple times.
Yeah, even she's inspired me. Like, I can, you know.
When you go to if you go to the big competitions, like the Worlds and stuff like that, and you'll see these guys. I mean, in fact, there's one at the head affiliation here in Minneapolis for our affiliation. I think he's 84, and he's a black belt. He's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go compete one more time. And like, he doesn't really know me. This is back when I was a blue belt. This is a couple years ago, but you know, older people can often decide who they're gonna roll with, because I mean, as you age, you have to respect certain things about your body that you're not going to be able to go full up with a 22-year-old if you're 65, probably, you know? So I lock eyes with this guy who's, you know, over 80, and we've never met face to face. And I kind of wonder, is he going to ask me to roll? And he looks at me, and then he looks away. Like, you're dismissed. I guess we're not rolling now. Fine. But why would he? He doesn't know me. He doesn't know what my style is. Doesn't know if he can trust me yet because he's
And you
old
were a
enough now
blue
that he's
belt at the time too. It's like, yeah,
right.
you
So like he
learn,
might
but
have
it's like,
he might be control, or he
yeah,
might have good control, but he might not. And I need to, he's gonna probably look for somebody that's a lot more experienced that he knows that is not gonna hurt him at that age. But that's part of the thing too, is we're taking care of each other. We're not trying to hurt each other. And
yeah,
I think a lot of people that are trying to hurt somebody, this is the thing. When people let early on, I think when they have a lot of ego and they're trying to prove to the rest of the gym or prove to anybody that they can handle it and that they are tough and whatever, one of two things happens. Pretty quick, they figure out that they're going to get their asses handed to them bad because of how hard they're struggling and trying and like trying to muscle through things because they're getting exhausted. I mean, that's the thing, is when you show up to jiu-jitsu and you're new, you're using nothing but strength and you gas out so fast. I am so
yeah,
much more efficient now. I am 147 pounds. I'm 45 years old, and I might have the best motor in my gym. It's up there. But these new guys come in, they're 220 pounds, and they look at me and they're like, I can maul that dude. And then within 45 seconds, their gas tank is gone because they don't know how to move in an efficient manner, and they're wasting all this energy. These guys either figure out that, okay, this is amazing, and I have to learn how to do this because it's super cool. Or the other side happens where they're threatened by the fact that they're losing right away a lot and they don't come back. And I think one thing, my kind of gut feel, and I haven't investigated this, but I think for a lot of veterans, once they get in those doors, most of us have a competitive enough nature that we're intrigued by what just happened. And we want to figure out why that little dude just beat me up. And
yeah,
and how do I learn to do that? Because that's cool. And like there, you know what I mean? That's the veteran piece, I think, or like, I don't want to throw it against the stereotype too much, but I do think for a lot of us that have that warrior ethos, that warrior mindset, to come into that kind of environment and see something like that happen, we're intrigued and we want to learn about it. I think there are some people who that thought really threatens them, and pretty quick they're out.
yeah,
That happens sometimes. But to me, it seems like, especially maybe it's just because of the individuals that we're approving too. Like if you want to apply for the jiu-jitsu scholarship with us and you meet our criteria, we're not asking you to sign up. Most of these people are people that are looking to make some kind of change. They have already decided that they need or want something different. So they're already motivated to try. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's different than walking down the corner and being like, hey, what's this? And being like, what's this place? And then walking out the door saying, yeah, that wasn't for me. A lot of the folks that come into contact with us, I think, are already like, they know that they want something else. And I think that helps to improve their success rates.
yeah.
Personally, I can't statistically throw numbers at you that say that's the case, but that's my gut feel.
Well, I've met, since I've been training at the RTSC here in Cleveland. You know, every time I always, whenever I meet another veteran, I'm always, sharing all kinds of, hey, have you talked to this person at the VA? I'm kind of like a
Yeah.
networking guy trying to help other veterans out, that are new. So, a lot of people that still aren't aware of your organization, and I've been like, hey, you should look into these guys. If you want to try and get your first year, or whatever covered, and they got really cool gear, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I've been, whenever we get new veterans, I like to try and send them your guys' way.
Yeah.
And, but, as your personal evolution has gone on, like what would you say some of your highlights of your jiu-jitsu journey has been?
One of them was, they're mostly through competition. I think the one that meant one of the ones that was the most important to me was this is January of 2020, and I took my little, he must have been 7 at the time. I took him to Cleveland to go see dad, who still lives in Medina, and my sister. And there was a grappling industries competition there that
Yeah.
weekend. So that's why I went, because I went and competed in it. Because I wanted them to be able to see me do this thing. Because my dad, like, I don't understand what this is. I know you love it. This thing. So I'm going to show you. You're going to come watch me get in the fight on these mats and see if I hopefully win. So I won the bracket, and right as the referee was about to hold my arm up after the gold medal match, I heard my son go, "Daddy," off to the side. I look over, and he's smiling. He gives me this like thumbs up, and I busted up laughing on the mat, like, but out of like real joy. Like, he gets it. Like, this is why I actually brought him here. And luckily, like, it's cool that I won, so he got to see that. But he understands what's happening, and I wanted him to be able to see an example of me, like, doing this, and that meant a tremendous amount to me, personally, to be able to have my dad and my kid see me win a tournament like that. I think the other things that have been fun, I like the stage a lot. I love doing Fight to Win. It's a really cool event. It's kind of MMA style, where you come out and you get your
Yeah.
walkout song. It's just exhibition. It's
They
basically
just
what
had
it
one
is.
at the IX Center.
Yeah, they just had one a couple weeks ago. I
Yeah.
thought about applying for it and coming out and
Yeah,
fighting
we
in it.
ended up having a couple of our guys from our team. So,
Yeah,
and like I said, my coach likes to run the team like a family. So it's like,
yeah.
if you're not competing but you're on the team, you're there
You're there.
supporting. And we're
So
all wearing our
fun.
colors, looking like the NWO, or something,
So
like a
fun.
big posse. But we had like tables along the side, and it was just like that was the opportunity where the light bulb went off, because you come out to entrance music and all
Mhm.
that, and I'm like, I'd love to just do one of those.
Yeah, and I got to do that, and I came out in an old sanitized flight suit. So I took off all the rank and everything, all the patches, with my leather jacket, sunglasses, and my helmet.
Nice.
Came out to Danger Zone.
That's
I've
awesome.
done it twice, and it's so ridiculous, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, totally.
And it's cool. I mean, I'm 45 years old. I get to do this goofy stuff. It's just fun. And I also do compete at the big ones, like Worlds and Masters Worlds, stuff like that. And I've gotten third place in a World Championship and first place in a World Championship at different belt levels. So, um, it's cool to say that. Like, what does it really mean? Well, not that much, because it just means that I was the best of the old small people that showed up in that building that day. It doesn't mean I was actually the best guy in the world. But that's the title of the competition, so sweet.
Yeah. We've
It's
got 8
cool.
of our guys at the Nogi one right now
Okay,
out there,
I
I think in
am
Anaheim, I believe.
supposed to go, but I tweaked my hip, and I'm kind of using the next day or two to feel out if I can actually make it out. I think I'm gonna have to pull out, but that's what happens. You're old like this. You train hard and you get nicked up. And I think, longevity wise, I'd much rather pull out now than hurt myself worse and miss 9 months of training or something,
Yeah.
for a silly injury. But I got another day or two to be able to test it out and see where it is. But
Gotcha.
um,
And you are, I believe I read you're now a brown belt, correct?
mhm, mhm, yeah.
And then, what was, I mean, how satisfying has your progress, you know, or how, I mean,
It's
what have you gotten out of this whole journey?
I kind of already said, like, I learned how to deal with failure much better than I had in the past. And you kind of hit on this a little bit before. It took me until halfway through purple belt to stop comparing myself to other people.
Hmm.
And towards the end of purple belt, I came to the conclusion that, based on my size and age, I should lose 80 to 90% of the time when I roll in the gym. If we're only talking about attributes, I'm old and I'm small. I should lose. If I don't, then that means jiu-jitsu has been a worthwhile endeavor because I have learned how to do it. I've learned how to defend myself. I've learned how to fight, to an extent. Um, and my day-to-day matches in the gym are much better than, like, I don't lose 80% of the time because I've been doing this for 8 years.
Yeah.
Because I committed to it and I practice hard and a lot and I love it. And when I finally came to terms, like, with, look, dude, you're just a little old guy. It's okay if these 25-year-olds are coming in here and you're struggling with them, even if they're new. It's fine. That is normal. That's okay. That's totally acceptable. So it's like learning, instead of being like, no, I have to be number one. That conversation in my head has started to go away. I don't have to be number one at anything. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm still here making progress.
What
I had to learn that.
Yeah, what I'm learning to accept is like what you just said, because I beat myself up too, like comparing with this comparison game quite a bit. Like I'll beat myself up more mentally than sometimes I get beat up physically when I'm in there doing it.
Sure.
But the thing I'm still struggling the most with is just not being able to like breathe like a fully functioning person. And that's just like, when I got somebody applying like pressure on top and you feel like you're drowning, man, I guess where I start winning is when I don't tap the pressure and I just say, all right, this sucks, but I'm not going to die.
This sucks, but I can cope with it.
Yeah. I'm not going to die. Just breathe slowly.
I remember early on, for the first couple years, there were so many times when I just wanted to stop because I was under somebody big and strong that knew what they were doing, and it was miserable. And I don't know if I panicked, but there would be that fight or flight system's activated, right?
Oh yeah.
And what's cool about that is that if you're using it the way it was intended. So if you had, this is a little bit of the psychology behind some of why jiu-jitsu works great, but if you have anxiety, depression on a day-to-day basis, that process is always going on in your body. Like PTSD triggers that. It's a little different structurally in the brain from PTSD to these other, issues. But, like anxiety, depression, PTSD are different. But there are some physiological components that are similar in terms of the fight or flight response. Well, when you're fighting in a match, you're actually using it as intended. So you're expunging all that junk. And when you get out of the gym, you might go back into these rumination loops and these thought loops that you had, but you gave yourself a little bit of a break and your body physically used that junk that's putting into your body, all that stress is putting in, use it for what it's intended for. So you're basically resetting yourself every time you go to the gym, every time you go to these matches.
Yeah.
But what's cool about it is eventually you learn how to cope with the discomfort. You learn to just say, yeah, this sucks, but I can deal with it. And I there is some point in my jiu-jitsu history where that stopped, where I don't feel like that anymore. If somebody big and strong and better than me is on top, I don't feel anymore like I'm waiting for it to stop or wishing it would stop. I know how to cope with it. And I'm looking for my way out. I'm looking to turn the tide. And that's such a cool feeling when you get to that point, but you only get there after you've been on the bottom enough times.
I know. I can't wait to get there because it sucks, but
yeah, it sucks. And I distinctly remember for a long time feeling like these panicked moments almost of like, this has to stop. I have to make the stop, and if it's bad enough, then you can tap. And then what happens? You trust the person to stop, and you build bonds with people when you do things like that.
Yeah, a lot, and it's true. It's just like, how much of my pride, though, about like, it's like one thing if you got me in an arm bar or something or in a choke, but he's just like laying on me, putting a lot of pressure, and I can't breathe, and my face is up in his friggin' nipple or whatever, and I want to tap because of that. That's
just the pressure.
Yeah, that just sucks.
But that's the cool thing is that you can.
Yeah.
And for some people, like for some veterans, that's a very therapeutic process. because of what they saw deployed, where the only way to stop an oncoming attack was to do something potentially, catastrophic, depending on the scenario. Like what if there's a kid involved, and you're deployed and it's a combat zone? I mean, it's just when you're in war, there are horrible things that happen sometimes, some of which you have a little bit of control over and many of which you have zero. And that creates a trust deficit in our community. That's what happens to human beings when you put them in that position. Jiu-Jitsu gives you an opportunity to learn to rebuild trust with other people because you have control. You say stop, they stop.
Yeah,
And
I like that.
that serves. You think about military sexual trauma, sexual assault, physical assault. There's a lot of, you don't have to be a veteran for jiu-jitsu to be an awesome tool to help you cope with stuff.
Yeah.
You just got to be a person.
And I'm still, and like I said, the trust thing is still not 100% there. And it's nothing against the people that I'm rolling with. It's an internal thing that I'm still working through, but I see where it helps. And I just got to be cool with, tapping and then and go through that and tap and let them get off me and then be like, all right, they got off me. I can trust them, maybe that's what I need to do.
It's just, it's, again, we're talking about incremental changes and gains, right? Because that's how you learn jiu-jitsu too. You learn it just tiny bit by tiny bit. That's how we rebuild ourselves after trauma too. Once we find a tool set, it doesn't happen right away. And like you said, sometimes, especially with therapy, sometimes it gets worse at first because now you're actually confronting the things you were trying to run from or numb. But now we're actually dealing with them, existing in them, coping with them, and learning how to move forward, recognizing that they're present and it's okay.
But the importance of finding a good school and community in that, is definitely, and I feel I've definitely found
that's awesome.
One like that, and we're right by the airport. So next time you come to town to visit family and stuff,
pop in there. Yeah.
Pop in, man. We love to have you.
I would love to. That'd be awesome.
We got I do that a lot. We Defy banner up on the wall. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
But, I want to get ready and wrap up here. But before I let you go, I want to ask a couple questions I normally ask guests on here. Who are 3 people who've inspired you or you can credit for making you the person you are today?
Well, I put mom and dad in there because they always believed in me. And my dad, one time he told me a really cool story about, I won't go into details, but it falls in line with that. Like when you're trying to protect somebody from failure, you do them a bit of a disservice sometimes. And my dad told me that he was never going to, he decided when he was a young parent that he would never try to do that to his kids. All he would do is tell them what they could do and never tell them that they couldn't do something. And I really do think that because it could have been really easy for somebody to say Air Force Academy. In fact, I said I had a liaison officer. There was another liaison officer that I also worked with that told my dad, I didn't know this, that told my dad I would never make it because my grades weren't good enough. My dad never told me that until I was like in my 30s. Because they said it didn't matter. That was irrelevant. You were either going to get in or you weren't. It was going to be based on you, and it wasn't going to be based on what somebody else said. So there was no point in telling you that. And if you were going to be disappointed, if you didn't get in, big deal. But you were either going to get in or not get in on your own merits. And all I wanted to do was support you so that there wouldn't be this question or distraction, So I lumped them together, for sure. And they're the biggest ones.
Gotcha.
For sure.
And then favorite toy as a child?
Hmm. Probably Nintendo.
Do they have a flight simulator on there?
No, no, I didn't I played the computer flight simulators, but man, I got a Nintendo Switch right now, and I'm playing Zelda Breath of the Wild on it.
Nice.
Right now. It was either that or the little Star Wars X-Wing one that the X-Wing that I had.
Oh, yeah. Nice. And then any message you have for our brothers and sisters currently serving overseas?
Um, just keep up that good fight, and when it's hard sometimes, and we even when you come back, like, no matter how hard it seems like it is to cope when you're back or while you're there on a deployment, there's always a way. There's always a way to cope, and you just have to find it. And We Defy Foundation is a really fantastic model for providing one tool set to help do that. That's why I love being a part of this organization, because I do truly believe there's always hope and there's always a way to cope. You just have to find the right tool set.
Gotcha. Thanks. Well, TJ, man, it's been great talking with you, getting to know more about you, knowing that you're actually grew up a neighbor here.
Yeah,
Everything
crazy.
But like real quick for anybody listening and wants to know more about We Defy or how they could get involved and support it, where would you send them?
I send it to our website. It's wedefyfoundation.org. You can do a couple things there. If you're a gym owner, you can learn about the gyms that we select to have the veterans that we sponsor. If you're interested in volunteering, you don't have to have any military background or even be in jiu-jitsu. We've got most of the people that are our volunteers are veterans that also practice jiu-jitsu, but we have all kinds of demographics of practitioners and non-practitioners that support us and help us. We've got about 250 volunteers now, and our entire organization is basically run by volunteers. We have about 4 people that we pay for certain professional services as contractors, but the entire board is volunteer. We have a tremendous amount of work and spots to utilize people's talents if they want to offer them to us. And if you're interested in the scholarship, you have to have a DD 214 with an honorable discharge. You cannot be on active duty. However, you can currently be serving in the National Guard or Reserves if you do have a DD 214 from an activation, and you have to have an 80% VA disability rating. If those are all things you have in service in a combat zone, then you can apply for the scholarship on our website, and then put you through that process, evaluate your package, and if it all comes together, then we sponsor you at a jiu-jitsu school within a certain drive of where you live.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Great organization. I highly recommend. And thank you for your part in my jiu-jitsu journey.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad to be able to do it. Thank you.
And real quick, before I let you go, could you do me one last favor?
Sure.
Cut a promo ID for the show. Just introduce yourself, and
Okay.
you're listening to today's Boondoggle.
Okay. Hi, this is TJ Blitz Kreutzer from We Defy Foundation, and you're listening to today's Boondoggle.
Awesome. TJ, thank you so much,
Great.
man.
Thanks,
I really
man.
appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time getting to know you, and hopefully, hit me up when you come to town.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. It'd be super fun to come in there.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.